story talking about different literary styles, and the first one I have here is actually Gothic literature. Gothic literature is a style that is characterized by gloomy settings, supernatural elements, and sometimes even creepy settings. Also, family curses in an atmosphere of terror and mystery. Gothic fiction actually emerged as a subgenre of Romanticism, and Romanticism is actually the appreciation of the beauties of nature. It's a focus on the individual, it's a focus on spirituality, which was a formal reaction to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a European intellectual movement. So yeah, Gothicism shares many similar features to Romanticism. It focuses on the darker side of humanity. It focuses more on like the evil side of humans instead of the appreciation of beauty. During this time, the Enlightenment was going around, and the Enlightenment emphasized reason and science over superstition and blind faith, blind Christianity. So Gothic writers were intended to thrill the feeling and emotions of readers with themes such as punishment and judgment. Okay, so that was what was going on in England. So Gothic literature was flourishing in England, while in the US, literature was the movement of Transcendentalism, which was a literary movement focused on science, nature, and individualism. So we also see some parallels from that to the European Enlightenment at the time. After that, we had the emergence of Romanticism, which was also like a response against this reason over feeling or head over heart mentality that was going around with science being imposed. The Romanticists of this time believed in emotion, feelings, rather than cold facts or science. So finally, we get into some authors. So I feel like the Gothic movement wouldn't even exist without Edgar Allan Poe. So Edgar Allan Poe was a figure in the 19th century. Tragedies in his own life really helped him discover what humans can really do and explore the human mind. So he frequently wrote about trauma, about the evils of man, emotional and mental disorders, and this is clearly seen in one of his most famous short stories, also one of my favorite ones by him, which is called The Black Cat. It's a story about an alcoholic who is driven insane by his addiction, and he ends up killing his cat. We can see clear themes of psychological trauma, and also we can see here that black cats represent evil in many different cultures. It's definitely a very Gothic story. Okay, so now we're moving into some of the characteristics of Gothic literature. So think of gloomy landscapes, for example, old castles, ancient monasteries, graveyards, cemeteries. Another frequent characteristic is also the focus on the dark side of human nature, or the darker side of human psychology. Also blood, nightmares, ghosts, and a sense of mystery. The most frequent characteristic is definitely the supernatural, and the best example is Macbeth by William Shakespeare. This is a play about three witches who tell the story of the Scottish general Macbeth, that he will be the king of Scotland, and he's encouraged by his wife, Lady Macbeth, to murder King Duncan, and then he becomes the new king. So there are a bunch of supernatural elements. Just murder by itself is very Gothic, I would say. For example, when they're conspiring against murdering Duncan, locked in a castle, so we have this very gloomy setting. I would also say the play starts with three witches, actually. First witch says, "When shall we three meet again in thunder, lightning, or in rain?" Those three elements are not something we associate with the positive, so yeah, in general, that's like one of the best examples of the supernatural in settings. Another characteristic is the emphasis on the corruption of the human mind. I'm not going to talk too much about this book because I've already talked about it before, but it's in The Picture of Dorian Gray. Definitely focuses on the specific characteristic. Characters suffer from psychological torment, and I'd also like to say hereditary curses and prophecies, which are techniques frequently used by writers to foreshadow something, like a character having a deep secret or like a deep past that he kind of has to hide, like for example having split personalities, as seen in the book The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is one of my favorite books. Narrative about experimentation. It's very like ambiguous, and it's a classic novel that talks about how a character can ultimately appear nice but is evil and corrupted in the inside. Now I will be talking about how we can see this modern Gothic movement. So the best example is probably dark academia, which you've probably heard before, but dark academia is an aesthetic based on mysteriousness, and it's very classist, but it focuses on like think boarding schools, universities, or darkened libraries and Gothic towers. It's very elitist and classist. Authors like Emily Dickinson, Oscar Wilde, Shakespeare have all contributed to the aesthetic in movies such as like Dead Poets Society and Kill Your Darlings as well. But it first appeared, I believe, in 2015. Got the inspiration from like universities such as Oxford and Yale. However, I would say that both this emergence in dark academia and even Gothic literature are somewhat problematic, rather Eurocentric in the way that they convey literature and languages, and this obviously contributes to the lack of diversity in the trend. Also encourages, I would say, like a certain level of elitism that like labels Eurocentric studies as superior and more intellectual than other subjects. And I would say also that it's somewhat privileged because the economic status you have to support this aesthetic. Both this emergence in dark academia and also Gothic literature tend to romanticize mental illnesses and unhealthy habits like caffeine addiction or lack of sleep or insomnia, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. Anyways, that's it. Thank you for coming to my channel. See you next time.